Hello, and welcome to the Celiac Disease Foundation's Policy Advocate Training Program. We are so grateful for your participation and commitment to advocacy. Celiac Disease Foundation policy advocates are the engine behind all that we do, driving policy change that now has our federal government recognizing the seriousness of celiac disease and dedicating funding for the critical research that will advance our shared goal of accelerating diagnosis, treatment, and a cure for celiac disease. Some of you might be asking whether you need to have celiac disease or be able to memorize exact bill numbers and funding recommendations in order to be an advocate. The great thing is, you don't. You don't need to have celiac disease, and it's not necessary to be an expert in government or policy to be an effective advocate. All you need is your voice, your passion, and your commitment to making a difference. And we'll work alongside you to provide the resources and opportunities to make celiac disease the national priority it should be. At the conclusion of this presentation, there will be a final poll that you'll need to complete successfully to become a policy advocate. Upon the conclusion of all training program polls, you'll receive your certificate of completion, which you will be able to log in and download. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us at advocacy@celiac.org with any questions you may have as you begin your advocacy work. Let's start with a brief overview of what being a policy advocate entails. The word advocacy means public support for or recommendation of a particular cause or policy. As a constituent, you are an indispensable part of our democratic system, and your voice has the power to influence members of Congress, the legislation they support, and the actions they take. The Celiac Disease Foundation advocates for policies on behalf of all people with celiac disease by working with the U.S. Congress, federal agencies such as the National Institutes of Health and the Food and Drug Administration, as well as state governments. Celiac Disease Foundation policy advocates advance policy change by educating their elected officials in Congress about the impact of celiac disease on Americans and why diagnosis, treatments, and a cure need to be a national priority. Policy advocates include patients, caregivers, supporters, researchers, and healthcare providers. No previous experience advocating to members of Congress is necessary to be a policy advocate. Everything you need to know to become an effective advocate will be included in this training. So why should you become a policy advocate? Well, the federal government is the largest provider of medical research funding, and until recently, the funding for celiac disease has been limited. Following Celiac Disease Foundation CEO Marilyn G. Geller's testimony before the House Appropriations Subcommittee in April of 2019, Congress directed the National Institutes of Health, or NIH, for FY 2020 to devote sufficient, focused research to the study of celiac disease. Congress has renewed NIH celiac disease language annually since FY 2021, and we will continue to request renewed and expanded language during every appropriation cycle. The U.S. Congress and federal agencies are making decisions that impact people with celiac disease, and these decisions can affect your access to medical care and also national funding for medical research. The best way to ensure that your needs are being considered in policy decisions is by sharing your story and explaining how specific policies will affect you or your loved ones. The first primary request for the Celiac Disease Foundation is to increase membership for the Congressional Celiac Disease Caucus. In a huge step toward increasing federal government recognition of celiac disease, on August 24, 2021, Congresswoman Betty McCollum launched the Congressional Celiac Disease Caucus. The bipartisan caucus was launched to support federal funding of celiac disease research and to advance legislation that will ease the suffering of those affected by celiac disease. Growing the caucus is one of the highest legislative priorities for the Celiac Disease Foundation. The caucus will help members of Congress raise awareness of celiac disease, both in their districts and in Washington, along with amplifying the voice of the celiac disease patient community. Our second request is that Congress increase National Institutes of Health funding for the study of celiac disease. Better treatments and a cure for celiac disease can only be discovered through research. Until recently, NIH has provided little to no funding for celiac disease. Beginning with the FY 2020 request, Each year, the Celiac Disease Foundation has worked to secure appropriations report language directing the NIH to devote sufficient, focused research to the study of celiac disease. In March of 2021, Celiac Disease Foundation CEO Marilyn Geller testified on patient unmet needs in celiac disease at the NIH Accelerating Progress in Celiac Disease workshop in collaboration with the world's leading researchers. As a result of this workshop, in December of 2021, NIH, for the first time ever, issued a notice of special interest in celiac disease to provide dedicated research funding for the study of celiac disease. While these are landmark achievements for the celiac disease community, this request for celiac disease research funding and recognition needs to be renewed on a yearly basis, making your emails to congressional representatives more important than ever. We also request that members of Congress support the inclusion of celiac disease in the Department of Defense's peer-reviewed medical research program. For the first time ever, and due to several years of advocacy working with congressional leaders, celiac disease was deemed eligible for study within the Department of Defense's congressionally directed medical research program's peer-reviewed medical research programs. While the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs, CDMRP, supports medical research projects important to improving the health, care, and well-being of service members and their families, it is also a research funding source that has benefited all Americans by funding high-impact research in prevention, screening, diagnosis, treatment, and quality-of-life issues for topic diseases. Research will benefit thousands of service members, their families, and all Americans suffering with celiac by generating strategies to prevent the disease. It's imperative that celiac disease's inclusion in the PRMRP is advocated for each year to ensure that this critical funding will remain available for celiac disease research. We also have several additional requests that are important to raise with your members of Congress. Include celiac disease in the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's, CDC, Disease and Conditions A to Z Index. Improved food labeling requirements so that celiac disease patients can purchase food items safely. Protect chronic disease patients from discrimination, bolster patient protections, and fight food insecurity for vulnerable celiac disease patients. Extend Medicare and Medicaid coverage for medical nutrition therapy, including dietitian visit coverage to beneficiaries with celiac disease. Promote funding for the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, for gluten-free labeling rule enforcement. We highly encourage all advocates to familiarize yourselves with the Celiac Disease Foundation's fact sheet. This is a comprehensive document that provides background on celiac disease, the foundation, and the issues that you're advocating for with your members of Congress. When communicating with your elected officials or their staff members, it's also helpful to provide them with the fact sheet so that they have all the information readily available. They can also use the fact sheet as a resource when reviewing our requests. You may also use the fact sheet to help craft these requests by relating the information to your personal story. Your personal experience with celiac disease is the most powerful advocacy tool you have. Your story gives you a unique perspective on the hardships people with celiac disease face and creates an emotional connection to the issue for legislators and staff members. The document, Crafting Your Story to Affect Change, can be found in the Advocacy Toolkit at iadvocate.celiac.org. Use the tips, prompts, and example of an effective story in this document to help you share your story. Remember to relate your story to our current requests. Here's an example of what an effective story might look like. I am a celiac disease patient, or caregiver, parent, physician, researcher, etc. The only treatment for my disease, a strict, lifelong gluten-free diet, is inadequate. The diet leaves me and millions of Americans suffering needlessly. I live in constant fear, knowing that ingesting just a crumb of gluten will trigger debilitating illness, causing me to miss work and other responsibilities, and that it will increase my risk of cancer, heart disease, and additional autoimmune disorders. Please join the Celiac Disease Caucus and support NIH, DoD funding of celiac disease research to develop new treatments, find a cure, and help improve the lives of patients like me. Please visit celiac.org/takeaction to contact your members of Congress. There you will find draft email messages on our various advocacy requests so that you can personalize with your information and then submit through our advocacy software. When you enter your voting address, our advocacy software will display your elected officials and will email them on your behalf. You will also be able to share your communication with your networks through social media and email. When logged into iAdvocate, you will find everything you need to be successful in your advocacy efforts, including the Advocacy Toolkit and the Advocacy Action Checklist. The Advocacy Toolkit contains the resources you need to communicate with your members of Congress and their staff as a Celiac Disease Foundation policy advocate. The Advocacy Action Checklist provides a simple roadmap to help you make the greatest impact in your first steps as a policy advocate. Download the checklist and share it with your network. Here are some other ways you can show your support. Email your members of Congress and their staff on a regular basis to keep celiac disease top of mind. Share Foundation social media posts and our monthly e-newsletter to promote awareness of celiac disease as a serious autoimmune disease. Share our Participate in Research page at celiac.org/participate-in-research with your network. Join more than 11,000 individuals and families participating in iCure Celiac, the Celiac Disease Foundation's database that gathers health information and critical insights from celiac disease patients to accelerate research for better treatments. Thank you for attending the Celiac Disease Foundation Policy Advocate Training. Completion of our program automatically pre-qualifies you for future congressional meeting opportunities with the Foundation. Please remember to download your Policy Advocate certificate and stay tuned for future correspondence. If you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out by emailing advocacy@celiac.org. We greatly appreciate your interest in advocating on behalf of the celiac disease patient community, as together we work to accelerate diagnosis, treatment, and a cure for celiac disease.